All right, evening everyone. Welcome to this first lesson for this technical interview preparation workshop this summer. And before we start, I would like to thank Zhongxun, right, Glenda and their team for helping us with this whole entire organization. So I'm the prof who's sort of like the advisor to this whole workshops. But the work is done by Zhongxun and Glenda, and I'm so grateful to them. I know they're not being paid. This to say first, they're doing this all as voluntary, as a voluntary job and to give back, okay. So it's very important at this point for me to also encourage all of you, even though it's the first session. Hopefully some of you will come back next year because it's summer to do this. And let me just give you okay, I'm going to say just two things before I hand over for the lesson proper, right? So first of all, some history. Now, this whole entire workshop thing was started in 2019. Okay, that time we only had like 50 students because we're doing a kind of a trial to figure out how this work and to work out the details. And it was actually initiated by my former student Yang Shun, whom you will meet, correct? Zhongxun. He's coming in, right?
Yes,
yeah, he's coming in a couple of weeks towards the end, right? He was the guy who kind of told me he was already graduated at the time. I think he was working at Grab or something, or was it Manta? I can't remember Okay, right at that time. Yeah, so then he came and said, Prof, Stanford has this course, so we should too. And then so we came out with something and then we ran this first time. Then obviously, okay, we were quite successful, right, in 2019. But we all know what happened in 2020, right? So the next year was supposed to do this, but it was not to happen because we had COVID and then it was a disaster and then it was just a real mess, right? And COVID didn't really end for 2 years. Okay, so this is actually going to be the fourth time, right? Its first time is 2019. Then year before last year, 2022 was the second time. Last year, 2023 was the third time, and this is the fourth time running this workshop, right? So I guess over the years we've also been improving the workshop, and I'm so grateful not just to Zhongxun and Glenda. Zhongxun and Glenda are like your current seniors who are in school, but you will actually meet a lot of the my ex-students and ex-alumni of SoC who are already in the tech companies. So interestingly, when many of the things you will hear about interview techniques are actually from the horse's mouth. These guys are people who are like you in the school, but now they work with the big tech companies, right? And then they are actually, many of them are actually doing interviews for those companies. So at some level, this is the real stuff that you're hearing, okay? And we've done this quite a few times, and I guess it's been effective. Now, the question is, why do you bother? Okay. So in case you don't know why we're doing this, let me explain to you the structure of profession. Now, but I'm going to say something. One of the things that I'm telling you now is that it is a bit dated in the sense that what I'm telling you is what was the case. The industry is rapidly changing with the recent layoffs. Okay, but let me tell you how it generally works, and it is still true for many companies. Okay, you must know that in our profession, it's a bit like law and probably consulting also. It turns out that the major way that you get the good jobs, the top jobs, either big tech, okay, are now finance. Okay, so interestingly, big tech has stopped the hiring for the last 2-3 years, except for TikTok. TikTok, you can still get internships and get jobs there. But right now, the big ones that are hiring is mostly finance. Okay, but in the past, let's say you bring yourself back, like 3 to 5 years. Okay, during COVID, actually they were hiring a lot, so big tech was hiring. The key way to secure the top jobs in our profession is through internships. Okay, and honestly, they don't really care about your grades that much. Okay, interestingly, CS is a bit chill, as in you work very hard in the first 3 years. Okay, if in the summer of the third year you secure a good internship and you don't screw up, okay, generally you have a job by the end of the fourth year when you graduate, right? And they actually don't care what you do in your fourth year as long as you don't fail. Okay, so this is the structure of profession. Okay, this is how it was for many years. Okay, and prior to the recent layoffs, right, the conversion rate was like 95%. Basically, if you get a job with Facebook or Google, right, you have to really screw it up not to get a conversion offer. Okay, this is prior to COVID. Now, obviously, COVID year was very bad. COVID year, but it was layoff year. There was layoff year whereby we had a lot of interns. I think we had like 20 interns at Facebook, right? And then that one is quite jialat. Okay, only one guy, okay, also my ex-student, okay, one guy out of 20 of them got internship. So that was a very bad year. When conversion was like zero, almost nothing. But in the past, before that, conversion was like 95%. Okay. Now, big tech is kind of like not doing well in recent years, but finance is doing really well. We have many students at Jane Street. Jane Street plays the best now. Jane Street, Jump Trading, Optiva, what else? Hudson River Trading, Citadel, right? So all these companies are still hiring. Okay, and again, the major mode of securing those jobs is internships. Okay, and all the big tech and these companies that are serious companies, to secure these jobs, well, you need to pass coding interviews, okay, which is why SoC, we are training you, and you guys be grateful. I think we're the only school in Singapore that does this at such a systematic way, correct, Zhou Xuan? Nobody else doing still, right? After I've been doing for 4 years already, nobody else is doing it. So hopefully you're after the first year, you will start preparing this. And hopefully second year, you are in good shape to get an internship. But the most important year, frankly, is the third year. Because the third year is where you will hopefully secure the final job offers, okay, by not screwing up the internship, right? First securing the internship, and then doing well there, okay, and then securing a return offer. All right, so this is kind of the context in which we're operating. Now, this whole entire sequence is really optional. This is not compulsory. There is no grades attached to it. Okay, but it's a very practical thing that we're doing for you, and it's doing it for your own for your good, own good. Right. And then one thing that I like you to be very to cooperate with us, which is that one of the things that we'll be doing is that we will be matching you up with your peers, right, correct, to do these interviews. Okay. Now, if you want to drop out, it's okay, fine to drop out. Please let us know. So we don't have a situation whereby you match you up with somebody else and then you just don't appear or you ghost him. Okay, so it's very bad. So like I said, there's no compulsion to do this thing. It's optional, but at least cooperate with us. Okay, if you're not going to stick around, please drop out and let the Zhou Xuan team know, so that they don't match you with somebody and then the other guy complains that cannot catch you, cannot do interviews with you. That's very bad for everybody. Okay, so I hope you just cooperate with us in this way. Okay, and so the lessons have been kind of I think refined over many years. Okay, and generally speaking, I'm very proud of my ex-students and also potentially Zhou Xuan and his team. Somehow we've all had very good teachers. All these guys that come back, alumni come back, all very good teachers. Okay, so I'm very proud of them, and hopefully this year will be good as well. Okay, and then we will finish this entire session in actually they'll be closing in August. Okay, where typically I will invite very senior people in the industry to come and do a kind of a panel, right? So normally we have representatives from different industries. We will have finance. Normally the Goldman Sachs MD will come. OGP, you have Hong Yi, okay, PMs, from former PM Sun. You have like TikTok. You have Shopee. Okay, basically different. You have different representatives from different parts of the industry. Okay, to come talk. Right. So hopefully that's something that you will come attend as well, and that is the final closing. All right, so that's all I have. Once again, I thank Zhou Xuan and also Glenda. Glenda is probably going to take over next year, and of course, Glenda will need hopefully your support to join her, for the next batch, right? Okay. On that note, anything else to add, Zhou Xuan and Glenda?
Nothing else.
Okay, if not, anyone has any questions, hands up, and then Kichu, and then I can try to respond. Hey, don't be shy. Don't be shy. Unfortunately, I think this is the first time you see me. The next time you see me would be probably at the end, right, for the actual panel. Anyone has questions? No hands, right? Okay, so I think I'm all set for today, and thank you much, Zhou Xuan and Glenda again. I will let Zhou Xuan lead you through the first lesson, okay, and also the team will continue the session. All right, thank you much. Okay, good night, and hope you enjoy this workshop. Thank you, Zhou Xuan. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, so let me just formally welcome all of you back to Technical Interview Preparation and Tips in summer, right, otherwise known as TIPS. So today we'll just be formally going through our first ever lecture. So we'll be focusing on the course introduction as well as the general landscape. Okay, so this session will mainly be focusing on the process of getting an internship and why you should start that process. Okay, so let me move on to the next slide. So what is TIPS, right? So TIPS is a 10-week program. It is student-run by SoC students for SoC students. right? So as Prof. Ben said earlier, right, the entire teaching team is made up of SoC undergraduate students, right? So, and we are here basically to share with you what we have learned from our experiences in like trying to get internships. So you don't have to go through like the painful process of like learning everything from scratch, right? So, yeah, so here's just like general outline of like what to expect the coming weeks. So in week 1 to 2, we have like the big picture, which is today, and resume preparation. So resume preparation will be held next week. So it will be a resume writing like workshops, and we've invited like several tech recruiters to come down to share a bit about what they look out for in resumes. So for the subsequent 3 weeks, we have technical interviews, right? We'll be focusing on technical interviews. So it's generally like how you should allocate your time and how to best impress the interviewer who is like sitting on the other side of the Zoom call. And in week 6, we have like interview soft skills. So we'll be focusing on the behavioral aspects of the interview itself. So it's more of like, how do you phrase your experience in a way that's relevant to the question that's proposed or posed by the interviewer on the other end of the Zoom call. And from week 7, 8, and 9, there will be multiple sharings. So week 7 and 8 will be sharing by your senior students who have interned at multiple companies and alumni who have like gained working experiences. And in week 9, we have front-end sharing by Yang Shun. So, and yeah. So in case you're wondering why it's like there's only 9 weeks here, right? When we say that it's 10-week program. So the last week is actually our course closing week. So I think Prof. Ben mentioned briefly earlier. So we will invite like several tech chiefs to come down, and they will basically describe like their experiences and what it takes to really succeed in the industry itself. Right. So really the goal of this course is to let students like yourself, right, have a glimpse of what you might be doing in the future. Okay. So let's move on to the objectives, right? So the objective here is really to help you understand why you should apply for internships, how you can do it, and what's really out there. I think many of the times as computer science students or computing students, right, there's really a wide range of jobs that we can apply, right? Say, for example, general software engineering, there's like backend, there's also front end, there's generative AI engineer, big data engineer, right? And there's really a lot of roles out there that you can apply as a computer science or computing student. And it's really up to you to figure out, what are the relevant skill sets in order to fill up those roles out there, right? And the next would be to build technical interview confidence and communication skills. So I think if you ask many of your seniors, right, they would probably say, just lead code. And although it's not a bad advice, right, doing lead code by yourself is actually very, very different as compared to when you're doing lead code when there's an interviewer or someone's unfamiliar and on the other end of the Zoom call, right? So in that case, if you ask many of the students who have taken like tips in the previous summer or the summer before that, they probably say like one of the biggest takeaway of tips is really getting to know how to communicate your ideas, your thoughts, your solutions to the person on the other end of the Zoom call. And of course, as part of the process, we help you to prepare your resume for interviews. We help to broaden your knowledge regarding DCS job landscape. Okay. So why do we have this course, right? So it's really to bridge the gap between what SoC teaches versus the skills needed to get internships, to increase the number of SoC alumni working in top tech companies. And in turn, this helps to increase the appeal of hiring SoC students, right? So because the number of your seniors who get into big tech companies, right, the more they're willing to hire SoC students in the future, right? So in general, we just want you to have like a fulfilling career achieved by making well-informed career decisions. And I think the last point here is particularly important, right? Because I think a lot of the people who comes to computing related majors these days are probably like drawn or partially drawn to the high starting salary. And they take this major because it kind of makes the most sense, right? Because I mean, and it's completely fine. It's a very objective way to make a decision because you based it off like statistics and data and numbers, right? But what we want to do here really is to start telling you guys, how to enjoy what you're learning and see how what you're learning in school applies to your actual career in the future. Okay. So some highlights of the course itself, right? As Prof. Ben mentioned earlier as well, there will be multiple peer learning activities. So first we have resume reviews. So after next week, after you've gone through the resume writing workshop, we'll be assigning you to three to four other students, right, to review their resumes. So there are two main aspects that we want you to learn from this experience, right? First is how to actually review a resume and to see, how other people are actually writing their resumes, right? And the second portion will be mock interviews with your classmates. So we'll be pairing you with another classmate from week 3 onwards, right? So you get to practice mock interviews with your classmate. And I think one of the most common questions asked would be, whether or not you can be paired with someone that you know. So I think although that is actually possible, I think what we want to really simulate is an environment or scenario whereby you're paired with someone random. And this helps to, it's parallel to how it's like in actual interviews, right? You wouldn't know who your interviewer is prior to the session itself. And, communicating your thoughts to someone who's familiar versus someone who's unfamiliar, that you're unfamiliar with is actually very different, okay? So the second part would be expert sharing panels, right? We'll be inviting like several recruiters to come down, students who have interned at major companies, alumni, as well as tech leaders of companies, okay? So what we will not cover is system design interviews. So generally, system design interviews is only relevant to like candidates with industry experience, and fresh graduates usually do not get asked like system design questions. Although this is not entirely true, there are certain companies that do ask system design interviews for undergraduates, but it will not apply, it does not apply to the majority of the interviews, right? So we will not focus on system design interviews. And the other thing will be like domain-specific interviews, right? Like say, for example, hardware interviews, mobile interviews, data science interviews, and so on and so forth. So these are not relevant to everyone, and we have insufficient time to basically cover all of them. Okay, so we'll be skipping all those domain-specific interviews. Okay, so yeah, I'll just formally introduce like the teaching team. So as you know, Prof. Ben is advising the entire teaching team. But on top of that, we also have Yang Shun, our SoC alumni, as well as Han Ming. So both of them are, okay, wait. So Han Ming is currently working in the US at Meta as a software engineer. And Yang Shun, as you might have known him, right? He's the author of Blind Identifier as well as the author of Tech Interview Handbook. He is an ex-Meta staff software engineer. Okay, yes. Yeah, and the teaching team includes myself. I'm Zongshin. Yeah, so I'm year 3 CS Stats. I've previously interned at CVW, Expensify, Jupyter Lab, TikTok, and currently am at TikTok. So co-heading the course together with me, of course, is Glenda. She's year 2 CS. She's currently at GIC, and she's previously at MinDev as a data scientist. So there's also Kailash, year 2 CS as well. He's currently at AI Center for Educational Technologies as a full stack software engineer. And he's previously at 111 Global as part of NOC Jakarta, NUS FinTech Lab as a front-end engineer, as well as Netcon Technologies as a cybersecurity intern. And we have Ariel, who is year 2 CG, currently at GXS Bank as a generative AI engineer. She has also previously interned at Shopee, Maybank, and as well as being part of the NUS FinTech Machine Learning Department. And we have Shen Yi, who is also year 3 CS, currently at ByteDance, TikTok. Previously was also at ByteDance, TikTok, DataTrust, CVW, and a whole bunch of other startups. And we also have Mihawk, who is currently year 3 Information Systems, currently at Essentral and previously at UOB. Okay, so let's move on. So yeah, here's just a quick confession, right? So this course is very much in its infancy, and we are really making a lot of things up as we go along. So it might not be like a super duper accurate reflection of what you see out there, but it will be good enough to be able to help you guys along, hopefully, okay? So most of the content from these slides are actually adapted from NUS Hackers Project Intern Talk, of course, with permission. So in case you're wondering what exactly is Project Intern, it's basically this Telegram group chat, which is where they discuss like internship related matters. They also do provide like one-on-one mentorships. So if you guys are interested, I will drop like the group invite link in Cosmology later after this session. Yeah, so for today's philosophy, right, it's really to get this high-level idea of how to prepare for internships, right? So we are not going to go through like this nitty-gritty details. There are, of course, a lot of resources here, but I will be uploading the slides after today's session, right? So do come back, revisit those links when you have the time. So the main question, right? Why do you want to do an internship? Okay, so why are we stressing for you to do an internship, right? And the idea here is that many of you are perhaps like CS students. I'm sure many of you are CS students. There are also like IS, BTech, AACG, and InfoSec students here as well. And I'm sure you all know that internship is part of your graduation requirement, right? So if you're a CS student, you're required to do 2 SIPs or 1 ATAP. And if you are, other computing related majors, you probably have like own equivalent graduation requirement that you need to complete before you can graduate. Right. So on top of being like part of a graduation requirement, doing internship allows you to gain like real world experience, right? So it will allow you to see how things that you learn in class, right, translates to reality, right? So for example, like in my past internship at Expensify, I had this opportunity to work on this like transpilation tool from Python to Golang, right? So as part of this process, I was required to create a lexer to generate the grammar, to generate the abstract syntax tree, and then to build a parser to parse the abstract syntax tree, right? So abstract syntax tree is something that you've learned in perhaps like CS1101S, right, under Meta Circular Evaluator. So I mean, it's interesting to see, right, how some of the things that you've touched in the past can actually be used in real life, right? So on top of that, right, doing an internship allows you to find out what you like, right? And internship is really, just a small step towards your end goal, right? It's really about securing a job after your graduation. And by doing all this multiple internships during your undergraduate years, it allows you to find out what you like and what you don't like. So many of these like niche areas, like say, for example, DevOps or site reliability engineering, right? I think many people are unsure whether or not they actually liked it, right? So you can perhaps like use an off cycles internship to work on those fields, try out these fields and see whether you like them, right? So if you like them, sure, great. I mean, you can continue working in that field, but if not, you can just cross them off from your list, right? And the next thing would be like meeting new people and mentors. So I think for me personally, I think I've met many great mentors in the past and they've taught me many things, even after I've left the company, right? So they have allowed me to kind of, learn new perspective, right? Both in terms of my career as well as my aspirations for the future. So of course, if any of you are interested in overseas internship as well, right? When you're doing an overseas internship, you get to explore the world. I say, for example, when you're working in Canada, you get to explore like the amazing scenery that they have in Canada, right? So because you're in a computing related field, right? There's the computing related internship salary tends to be quite high. So you get to enjoy that as well as other perks. Okay. So yeah, going back to graduation requirement, right? So this is a snippet from one of the CS course websites, right? So basically you're required to do a 6 months internship or 3 months internship. So you can find your own respective graduation requirement in your own respective like majors website. Okay. So yeah, regarding real world experience, right? So there are 3 main examples that I have here, right? So the guy on the left is a software engineering intern at Google, and he was working on this internal tool in the Flutter team, right? So this internal tool that he created was so useful that it was actually featured on Flutter's official YouTube channel, right? And then in the middle, we have Asana's blog. So this blog is like an engineering blog where they showcase like the stuff that their interns have built during the summer. It's quite an interesting read, so I recommend that you guys follow some engineering blogs as well. And on the right, we have like a merge request by Tan Yi-Liang. So Yi-Liang is actually graduated like quite a few years ago already, but he took part in this program called the MLH Fellowship Program. And as part of the program, he built like React Concurrent Mode Profiler. And this merge request was eventually merged into React. And if any of you don't really know what React is about, React is this really popular web framework that is used by millions of people. And in fact, it's used by most companies out there who actually does some form of websites. Yeah. And I can tell you that this is, something very exciting, okay? So when you as an undergraduate, right, or even a freshman, right, is able to push and deploy features to production that is used by like millions of people every month, right? So it comes down to like a point where you realize that, grades don't actually matter that much because when you actually picked up a skill so useful, so impactful, right, that you're able to contribute to a company's code base, and that itself gives you a lot of confidence, okay? Yep. So going back to find out what you like. So on top of like finding the particular domain that you want to work in, there's also like whether or not you want to work at a startup versus whether or not you want to work at a big tech, right? And also the company purpose, right? Whether you want to work in product management, consultancy, or quant trading, so especially if you like mathematical modeling, say, for example. Right. So regarding the company culture, right, I think it's important to find a culture that fits your working style and to understand the company's values, right, and how they align with yours. Okay. And regarding the nature of the role, right, would you like to work on the front end? Would you like to work on the back end or product engineering, so on and so forth? Yeah. So as part of the process, as I mentioned, on top of what I've mentioned earlier, right, you get to meet new people, new mentors, meet other interns, and learn vicariously through the experiences of others. And I think the most important thing here is that in almost every other company, there's usually a very senior engineer. And I think it's important for you like to kind of ask advice or feedback from this particular guy who have like perhaps entered the industry 10 to 20 years ago, right? So these are people who have experienced the same exact thing that you are currently experiencing, but only 10 to 20 years ago, right? So you can ask him about things like how can you improve as a software engineer? How can you best prepare yourself for the things that are coming ahead, right? So I think these are some important feedback that you should ask when you're working with like very senior people. So now that we've talked about why you should do an internship, right? What's exactly the process of like going through the internship itself, right? So of course, the first step is knowing the process itself. And the second step would be prepared to apply, right? So this is where tips comes in, right? Regarding resume preparation as well as interview preparation. So we'll touch on both of these things in the coming weeks. And in step 3, it will be the part where you actually apply, right? So where do you find the internships? You have to get ready your referrals, as well as be ready to handle the rejections that's about to come in your way. And finally, step 4, right? You want to go through the interview process itself. So this is just like a general structure of how the entire process will look like. So first you will apply, and then if you're successful in the resume screening stage, you'll go on to the online assessments. So usually this assessment can be online, or it could be like a take-home exam kind. So usually this leans towards like either lead code-based, SQL-based, or more of a development-related task. So once you pass, or assuming that you pass the online assessments, you go through like the interview process. So the interview there's mainly like the technical side as well as the behavioral side, right? So for the technical interviews, you generally would have an interview with a software engineer in the company itself, as well as an interview with like the hiring manager, right? So broadly speaking, there'll be like these 2 types within the technical interviews portion, right? So once you get through those stages, right, you get either a rejection or an offer letter. So also depending on the company that you're interviewing for, right, there can be multiple stages of interview. Right? Say, for example, Google full-time application actually has like 5 different interviews before you get onto the team matching stage. And even then, it's not guaranteed, right? So I think I can tell you that this, like, as I've experienced it myself, right, going through 5 rounds of interviews and then getting a rejection at the end is a very, very demoralizing process. And the problem is you don't do this like once or twice, right? This is something that you have to do and go through like maybe 20 to 30 times as you go through your summer internship application. So this is a very, like I said, a very soul-crushing, very demoralizing, very mentally draining process. And this is really where like tips comes in, right? We are here to guide you through this entire process. And yeah, and so right now it's May 2024, right? So this is the part where you kind of attend tips. And in summer 2024, which is like literally like right now, you are required to build your skills and experience, right? So this could be through your either orbital or your internships, and you'll be required to prepare your resume and prepare your interviews, right? So this is all under tips, and we'll aim to achieve those, right? So come July and August, right, you're required to start applying for your internships for next summer, May 2025. And from August to December, it'll be the period where you'll start interviewing for the companies that you would like to work in and finally get an offer letter. So I'm not sure if you're wondering about this, but I definitely was as a year 1 student. It's about why do you start applying for internships so early, right? It's literally like 1 year before your starting date in May 2025. And this is just how the tech industry works, right? Many of these big tech companies do open their application really, really soon, really, really early. So just make sure that you don't miss the deadlines. And if there are companies that you want to work for, do actively check out their career website so that you can apply them. And if you miss the deadline, yeah, you'll be setting yourself up for disappointment effectively. Okay. Yeah, so next part will be preparing your resume. So prior to this session, right, prior to this session, you have been asked to like submit like your initial resume, right? So don't worry if your initial resume is actually very bad, or for lack of better words, like it completely sucks, right? Because the whole goal here is really for you to think about like technical accomplishments that you've had like over the last year and how much value have you added into your resume, right? So in the coming weeks, we will let you go through like a resume writing process, and you'll be required to resubmit your resumes for other people to review, right? So in that period of time, I do take the time to review your resume and then touch them up if required. So there are a few links here that I've linked down, right? So there are resume writing resources, one from Tech Interview Handbook, as well as the other from this guy called Kenneth Liu. So he actually wrote this blog about like how his resume has actually evolved over the years, especially as an undergraduate to a graduate and finally in the industry. So yeah, do check it out. Kenneth Liu is also I think the maintainer of like the Project Intern Telegram chat group. Yeah. So regarding the resume templates at the bottom, right? These two templates are actually written in latex or latex. I don't, yeah. So it's not necessarily to write your resume in latex, right? So you can just absorb these ideas, like look into the way that they're writing their resumes, and then copy paste those into your Microsoft Word or Google Docs resume. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, like I said, a more detailed sharing session will be held next week. Okay, so let's move on to the part about like preparing for interviews in general. So when you're preparing for interviews, right, we highly recommend Python for coding interviews, right? So, and the reason behind this is that the standard library is actually very, very powerful in Python, right? Say, for example, you need a heap or a trie-class, right? You can write those in one line, right? And if you're aiming to work at high frequency trading firms, do use like low-level languages like C++, C, Rust, or Go instead. So most people I know use Python, C++, Java, and JavaScript. So as year one students, I understand that, many of you have gone through like 2030S, and therefore you're very familiar with Java, right? But the thing about Java is that it is incredibly verbose, right? So say, for example, you would like to create like a frequency map. So in Python, you can do this in like literally one line, right? Just using the counter from the collections library. But in Java, you have to like initialize the hash map, like check whether it contains the key and then put the key in, so on and so forth, right? So it's just very verbose and it's not very time efficient. Okay. Yeah, so these are like some more links for you to decide how do you want to prepare for your coding interviews. And once again, there's this tech interview handbook link here. So the tech interview handbook is really useful if you're just starting out, right? So this is the only resource that you need actually. So just make sure to spend some time to like digest the content in here before like looking at other guides. And regarding the Asana technical interview guide, right? So like the tech interview handbook, this guide covers like a lot of the fundamentals knowledge about how to prepare for interviews and best practices during an interview. So it also goes into like more detail about the like soft skills like communication and prioritization and so on and so forth. Right. So it's very interesting, Rick. Just take it, just read it in your own time. Yeah. So the general philosophy regarding like interview prep, right, is practice, practice, and practice, right? You have to do practice in order to get good at something, right? You shouldn't expect to be good at something without any form of practice. So do leak code questions consistently to get yourself into the mental space of interviewing, right? Do mock interviews and don't avoid hard questions, right? So if you get stuck, look at a solution quickly and then move on. Don't waste time being stuck, okay? So the thing is, the entire process is very, very exhausting, right? But it's important if you want to get into this field, right? It's a necessary evil. So just imagine like your Google, right? Your company is Google, and every other CS graduate who graduated last year is aiming for your company. And the only way you could like quickly filter out candidates would of course be passing them like the technical interviews, right? Leak code, just to test their technical ability, right? Although it is not the most accurate way of filtering candidates, it is the quickest way, right? And that's why companies do that, right? So, but at the same time, of course, it also gets easier as you do more, right? So do not be disheartened. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff that I've said like so far, right? Do take like some time to kind of digest what I've just said, let it simmer in your brain and let it like marinate a little bit, right? Take it one step at a time, right? So I think, as an undergraduate, right, especially as freshmen, you have a lot of time to think about your career aspirations, like what do you want to do in the future? So take it one step at a time, right? Figure out what you need to do, right? And like do some goal plannings, right? And make it short-term and long-term goals, right? Figure out what you need to do to achieve your short-term goals. And hopefully those short-term goals can help translate into your long-term goals. And of course, we are here at each step of your journey, right? So feel free to reach out if you require any help. And of course, the best time is to start now, right? I understand that many of you have like just taken 2040 and perhaps like you're wondering, how well did I actually do in that last 2040 final exam, right? And I think some of you might perhaps even be hesitating because perhaps you didn't do well in 2040 and 2030. And so it's really difficult for you to get any technical interviews, or even if you do, right, it's really hard to pass them. But the point is, if you don't start, right, when would you, right? So really the whole goal here is there's no best time to start. And the only time to start is literally right now. And I've known many people, right, throughout my time in SoC and throughout my entire whole sequence of internships that I had. I've known many people who had really, really low cap, but but they were still able to make it into like big tech. And I find those people like very admirable, right? Because they're willing to put in the effort, willing to put in the hard work in order to achieve what they want. And I think this is something that companies themselves are able to see as well, which is the reason why, you know, companies actually don't prioritize grades at all, unless of course you are competing for like quant trading and the related jobs, right? So those may require grades, but in general, big tech don't look at your grades. Okay, so let's talk a bit about like the career landscape in general. So there are three main types of companies, right? So there's this early stage startup, late stage startup versus like a big company. So usually for an early stage startup, it's like less than 100 people working at a company. It's a very close-knit community where everyone's like knows everyone. And regarding like for a big company, you're usually just working within your team. Okay. So for early stage startup, the base salary tends to be wait, sorry, this is not a bit higher. It's supposed to be actually much lower than big companies, but you have more equity ownership, right? But because this early stage startup haven't get listed yet, this equity that they have like are effectively monopoly money, right? They are not worth anything. But the type of work that they do, right, is usually like mainly product development, right? So engineers, as an engineer at early stage startup, you do get to work on many things, a wide variety of issues. Whereas in the case for like, say, for example, big companies, right, these companies usually have very diverse roles, very specialized roles, right? So for example, infra, front end, back end, so on and so forth, right? Yeah, so regarding the career ladder at a startup, it's tentatively more unstructured, right? There's no engineering levels and there's no formal mentorship. In the case for big companies, it's much more structured, it's much more well-defined. And also in the case of startups, in general, the iteration speed is much faster, right? Because they are struggling to find like the product market fit. Whereas in the case for like big companies, they have already had a very, very stable product. So in order to not ruin whatever expectations that their user have for their product, right, they tend to iterate very, very slowly, right? So each feature that they roll out, they have to run multiple experiments in order to make sure that, you know, this is what our users want, right? Okay. Yeah. So this part about working in SG versus working in the United States. So the gross monthly salary that I've placed here is actually data from pre-2021. So it's not very accurate now, but you could see like how high the starting salary is prior to like during the COVID period or in 2021, right? So yeah, and with regards to like the United States, your annual salary can be very, very high, but your tax rate is also equally eye-popping, right? It can go as high as like 40 to 50%. And yeah, so it really depends on you whether or not you want to work in SG or United States, right? So with regards to like the talent access, when you're working in Singapore, you're usually dealing with talents from like around the regions, mostly in Southeast Asia, right? Whereas in the case of in United States, you're working with very global talent, right? You'll be meeting people from every corner of the world. It's extremely diverse, effectively. And the type of companies that you'll be working at, in Singapore, right, so especially like big companies, you'll be working in the branch offices, right? So you wouldn't be working on like the main product or very exciting projects in Singapore, honestly speaking, unless, for example, the company is HQ'd in Singapore, like say, for example, TikTok, right? So TikTok is HQ'd in Singapore, so you tend to have more exciting projects here. So in the case for large US, right, the HQ of large companies tends to be in the United States, and therefore, you know, there are more exciting developments that can be had at overseas, right? So these are things like building new languages or frameworks or tools and so on and so forth. Okay, right. So going back to the point of like finding internships itself, right? So how do you find an internship, right? So the first step, unlock your phone, look at every other app that you have, every email that you've received, and every service that you use, and then Google the app name and internship, right? So say, for example, like Spotify internship, right? So Spotify is something that I use, right? So, and I'm interested in working at that particular company, then just go ahead, go Google Spotify internship, right? So there's also this thing called like the job aggregators, right? So job aggregators like LinkedIn, say, for example, I just turn on the job alerts, search for software engineering intern, and then set a location and then save as a job alert. Otherwise, there's also this thing called Untapped. So Untapped is also, like for some reason, it changed its name like 3 times. It was formerly known as Jumpstart, and then it became Canvas, and then finally it became Untapped, right? So yeah, you can use job aggregators to kind of make like your jobs of internship searching experience much easier, right? So yeah, so that's it. So this is like one example of how it might look like. So say, for example, Robinhood, like 2 years ago, used to be quite popular. So you can be searching for Robinhood internships, then look for the career websites, and then just fill in the form on the right? So it's as simple as that. Just look out for the internships that you want on Google. Okay. Yeah, so in general, referrals help, but they are not a must, right? So don't be shy to ask seniors. At most, like they say no, right? So usually, it helps to get you through like the resume screening stage. So at least you get online assessment or an interview. But honestly, from my experience, I don't think like referrals are very particularly important, right? What's important is that you get to know the person that you are asking for help from, and hopefully, he or she will pass your resumes to the recruiter, right? It's pointless if you don't know the person prior to asking him for a referral, right? Because if not, he will just pass you his referral code, and the HR recruiter would know nothing about your resume, right? So that's the thing about that. Okay, so next part is through agency. So this is not very relevant for like undergraduates. So I'll just like I'll just clip these slides because it's not very relevant to us. And yeah, rejections. So you need to be prepared to like handle rejections, right? So this is like one of your seniors who have gone through like internship last year, and he just sent me like all of these rejections that I've gotten, right? So you can see that rejections is really like a part and parcel of the interviewing process, right? So don't be disheartened when you look at or receive like, rejection. Okay, so the point is everyone struggles a lot, right? And it's not just you and myself, right? It's everyone, even people with extremely good CAP, except of course like people who did ICPC or like IOI. I mean, technically we all know that they are pretty good at technical interviews, but in general, everyone struggles a lot, right? So do not be discouraged just from the fact that you couldn't solve like perhaps like easily good question, right? Everyone starts from there and then they slowly build up from there. And across the many interviews that you go through, you only need one offer to secure your summer internship, right? So just take note of that. And the idea is you're not always very lucky, right? You might have had the necessary skills to succeed, but luck may not just be on your side, right? So say for example, I went through the 5 rounds of interviews, and at the end of the day, they tell me that, they found someone who is a better fit for the role, right? It's not that, I wasn't able to pass those interviews that I went through, but it's more of like that there isn't just enough headcount for you to be part of the company, right? So the important thing here is to really brush up on your skill, and when the opportunity comes, right, when you finally have luck shining on your side, you'll be able to get an offer. Okay. So a rejection is really not reflective of your worth as an engineer, and all it means is that the things didn't go right for that particular interview or for that particular company. Okay. So another thing is, I don't feel ready, or many of you would have like this mindset, right? About I don't feel ready. I will only apply when I am ready to interview, or so and so forth. And I can tell you that this is a very dangerous like mindset to be in, right? Because last summer, or rather like 2 summers ago, when I had this particular mindset, I keep delaying the need to actually apply, right? So when I finally choose to apply for a particular internship role, right? So even though that, as you can see here, even though that the team found my submission to be really impressive, right? Given the number of outstanding offers and the pipeline of candidates, we will have to hold on like the next step of the interview process and so on and so forth, right? So what they're basically saying is that there are people, also what they're basically saying is that I applied too late, right? There are people ahead of me in the pipeline who have already gone through the interview process and offers have already been sent out, and there's just no more headcount for me to be part of the company anymore, right? So by having this mindset, it's really dangerous, right? Because you are denying yourself the opportunities to be part of a company that you so desire, okay? So the idea here is that, of course, you will fail a lot, right? You will fail a lot. And it's a marathon, not a race, right? As an undergraduate and as a freshman, right, you have like 3 years ahead of you. So just take your time, like one step at a time, right? Learn the things that you have to learn. Don't scheme on your foundations. Just put in the hard work, the effort required to get good at technical interviews, leak code if you must, right? And at the end of the day, decide. I mean, it's your future, right? So you have to decide on what path you want to head down, right? And the mental model here is always ask yourself, what can you learn from this particular experience, right? From each rejection that you get, there are two things that you can do, right? You could perhaps like cry all night, right, regarding that particular rejection that you've gotten, or you can learn from those experiences and tell yourself, like, how can you possibly improve from here, right? What's something that you did, perhaps not very satisfactory during the interview process itself. And what I always do actually is during an interview process itself, I will ask the interviewer beforehand if I could record this entire session, right? So once the interview session is done, I will go back and review the interview that I've just did and to see, if there's anything that I could improve or work on for the next interview, right? So this is something that's very important, right? You should have a growth mindset, like when approaching like any of the rejections that's coming in your way, okay? Yeah, problem-solving mindset. So this guy, Avil, he's actually NUS Hackers president like a few years back. So he basically wrote this blog about he basically struggles finding a summer internship as well. And he wrote this blog about how he can be relentlessly resourceful beyond startups. Right, so what he did in order to get a summer internship that year is that he went around Block 71, which is like Singapore incubator, startups incubator, and he started walking around finding companies that he likes. And when he bumps into one of the people from that company, he will engage in a conversation with that person, right? And one of those person eventually got him an interview, and he passed an interview and he got into that company, right? So it's really about being resourceful, being relentless, and being pursuant of like your dreams, right? Okay, so if you have had multiple offers, right, that's great, right? You can probably relax right now. You have the luxury of choice, and you can choose to negotiate if you want. I don't recommend it, but you can choose to negotiate it if you want. And there are tons of guides out there for you to look at. But for some of you, right, it's possible that you may not get an internship for that particular summer, right? So what are some alternatives can you look at, right? So the first thing here is that you can work on your own project or your own startup, right? So some of you here are currently working on Orbiter as well, right? So perhaps it's a great idea that you want to continue on like next summer if you couldn't find an internship, or perhaps you want to work on your own startup and apply for SoC grant or something like that, right? The other thing will be like undergraduate research. So there's this program in SoC called the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program or something like that, UROPS, right? So you could look into that as well if you're interested in research. There's also CCSGP Public Service Fellowship, right? So this is like very similar to CVW, where you work with the community to design solutions and to design solutions for them. Or you could take some time to relax and take a breather, right? I mean, you've gone through like a very tedious interviewing process, so maybe just take some time to relax and breathe. So other than that, there's also like other opportunities as well, like say, for example, open source programs. So if I recall correctly, Prof. Demif, right, he runs like a few open source projects, right? So you can approach him to ask whether or not you can work on those open source projects. Other than that, there's also like the Google Summer of Code, which is basically like this whole bunch of open source projects who are looking for interns, and you can apply through Google Summer of Code with an appropriate proposal. And if any of those open source projects likes your proposal, right, they'll be willing to have you on board to work on this particular open source project. I say, for example, Postgres. Another thing that I briefly mentioned earlier as well is the MLH Fellowship program, right? So if you're interested, do look up on like all these programs, right? So the MLH Fellowship programs allows you to work on really, really exciting projects. They will attach you to one of the big tech companies who has like open source projects, and you can work and you can spend your summer working for them. Yes. So they do also provide stipends in case you're wondering. So yeah, that's that. Okay, so parting thoughts. So do note that the entire process is extremely emotionally exhausting and tiring, and your friends are of course going through it are also going through it with you, right? So talk to them and help each other out, right? So you can also practice mock interviews with one another, and do remember that you only need one offer in order to get your internship for the summer, right? And there's no such thing as like being prepared enough, right? So every position that you don't apply is a definite rejection, and preparation involves like accumulating learnings, and every failed interview is a learning experience. Okay, so just take note of this, and luck favors those who are prepared. Okay, so regarding homework, starting from today, we have like 6 LeetCode questions per week. So you can just do one every day for for the week itself. And for those of you who have not yet submit like the pre-course survey or like the initial resume submission, so please do submit them latest by this Friday, 2359. So maybe I'll just like quickly go through like a LeetCode demo, like of how to use the LeetCode website in case like many of you who like have never heard of LeetCode before. So this is like an example of the LeetCode interface, right? So on the left, you have like the questions itself, right? So yeah, you can look through the questions. There are hints provided to you. And this is the portion, okay, it's not loading right now, but this is the portion where you would actually like write your code and submit your code. And these are the test cases, right? So you could also like replace, okay, give me a moment. You could also like change the language that you're using. So for example, I mentioned earlier, you could use like Python, Java, so on and so forth, right? Okay, why is it not loading? Okay, so that's that. And these are the test cases here. And yeah, let's go on to So this is the main LeetCode website, right? So here's so sometimes they will post like really interesting articles. You can take a look at them. They also post like interesting tips and tricks of how you can, exploit some of your language specific libraries. And this is the set of problems, right? So for each of the questions that we pose to you, right, you could then say, for example, tree sum. You can then go ahead and search it here, right? And there we go. So you can just click on tree sums here, right? Okay, then otherwise, there's also contests if you are interested, but they usually they are held like every week as well as every bi-weekly contest. So if you're interested, you can work on that as well. And the other part would be Tips portal, right? So as part of like your participation in Tips, we also have created this website for you to kind of track all your progress, right? So here you could add your questions, right? So say, for example, just now we work on this question called tree sum, right? So you can just click on tree sum, you can click on medium. So you can adjust the difficulty, but I think generally you wouldn't need to, right? Yeah, and you could also adjust like the language that you've chosen. So Python 3, say, for example, and then you can just paste the code that you've written here. So once you've pasted the code that you've written here, like say, for example, I'm just going to say, okay, then you can add a question. So question is added, and you should be able to see it at the front, right? So you should be able to see it here, okay? Otherwise, there will also be tasks. So I think in about 2 weeks' time, we will have like the task tab ready for you. So in due time, do check like the tasks that you need to complete. And otherwise, yeah, that would be like the entire Tips platform. So there's also this interview tab, which we will go through in week 3 later on, right? So it basically this is basically a place where you will have your mock interviews with your partner, okay? Other than that, yes. So yeah, so setting some expectations and final thoughts. So what you need to understand is like the program itself is really not going to be like a miracle program, right? So you're not going to take part in Tips and then at the end of 10 weeks becomes like the most ideal candidate to join a tech company, right? And then expect to be like working at Facebook, Google, or like Jane Street. So this is not what the program is about. And it's really about getting you up to speed in a way that best represents like your technical abilities or technical accomplishment so that you can give yourself like the best chance to secure an internship itself, right? And I think many of you come into this program like with a lot of questions about like the recent tech layoffs and companies like not hiring, right? And will I be able to like secure a job in the future? And I think that's a reasonable anxiety that many students face, right? And I would tell you that, it's true, right? It's true that the internship pie itself is also shrinking and the competition is getting fiercer each year, right? And the situation today is unlike 2 to 3 years ago where, companies are effectively like borrowing money like crazy, right? And therefore, they are hiring like crazy. And this causes like the tech to boom. So it might get better next time, or it might get worse. I don't really know. But what I can say for sure is that, we are trying to make sure that you get a good chance of being part of the pie, right? And that will require a lot of hard work on your end. Okay. So yeah, so I think that will be the end of today's session. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. Otherwise, you're free to leave. Thank you. Okay. What odd jobs should I get if I don't secure a software engineering role? Oh, the slides will be uploaded after this session, so like maybe around 9:30 or so. Yes, so regarding the SoC tips demo, once you have completed your questions on LeetCode, right, do submit your questions on SoC tips so that we can keep track of your progress. Yes. Okay, so I have a question. So are all the code questions listed on Cosmology available in LeetCode? What do we do otherwise? So tentatively, we are following this thing called the Tech Interview Handbook. So you can just like go ahead and look it up. So Tech Interview Handbook. So there's this thing called Grind 75. So basically, we're following this schedule. We are putting like 6 weeks and 8 hours per week, right? Actually, I think 6. Yes. So we're following this list of questions. Like you can see that it generally follows like easy questions at the start and then it slowly gets difficult. So if the questions that you see on Cosmology do not match like what you see here, you can always like refer back to the Tech Interview Handbook, right? So because this is something that we are generally following with. So what if I'm not, so there's another question. What if I am not able to do the interview for one of the weeks, right? So if you're not able to do the interview for one of the weeks, do inform us prior to like the week itself, because like the partner that you're paired with, of course, have to find another partner, right? So if you're not able to do it, do inform us prior to the week itself so that we can allocate another person for your partner. So our referrals, so there's another question. Are referrals and cover letters usually required for internship applications? So generally, across my internship applications, I haven't had the opportunity. I mean, there are some internships that of course do require cover letters, but I've never really sent them. And I think it doesn't really matter, honestly speaking. And with regards to like referrals itself, right? So referrals are actually, I wouldn't say referrals don't matter. It do matter if you know the person personally, right? But if you don't know the person and you ask for a referral, it doesn't really help because the person won't actively reach out to the HR recruiter to connect the HR recruiter with you, right? So that's like the entire point of the referral. So next question, how long should I spend on LeetCode question? When is it better for me to check for an explanation of the solution? So I think generally for easy questions, if you're already very familiar with them, I think like 5-10 minutes will do. If you're not very familiar with easy questions, I think like a reasonable time would be like 20 to 30 minutes, especially if you're just starting out. With regards to like medium questions, usually I'll take about 20 to 30 minutes if you're really good at medium questions. And if not, you can spend about 30 to 60 minutes, like 1 hour. And then with regards to hard questions, so I think hard questions is something that you'll almost never experience like in actual live interview itself. Usually hard questions are part of the OA or part of the take-home assessments that you get. But of course, you have to pass those online assessments first, right? So regarding those hard questions, it can take like usually when you're practicing, it can usually take like 1 to 2 hours. But if you're good at it, probably take about 40 minutes or so. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable time to do like the different variants of LeetCode questions. So another person asked if the video will be recorded. Yeah, the video will be recorded. Okay, so that's another question. Should we just stick to the same programming language when doing LeetCode, or should we try out ones we are not familiar with or tried before? So I think personally for myself, I've always stick to like either Python or C++. So for Python, and it really depends on the role that you're applying for, right? So say, for example, if you're looking to join a high frequency trading firm, then definitely I think the interview process itself will require you to use C++, right? So if you're already familiar with very C++ and you're looking to join high frequency firms, right, don't bother changing your programming language, right? Just stick with C++ and do it all the way. So say, for example, now you're aiming for like big tech or like any of the other generic firms out there, right? I think if possible, try to stick to one language as well. Like say, for example, like I recommend earlier, Python would be a good language. But of course, if you are looking to learn a new language and you're looking to use in technical interview preparation to learn a new language, then sure, go ahead. I'm not sure if that's the best way to learn a new language, but sure, go ahead with like trying out new language. Yeah. Okay, so someone asked what is high frequency trading firms. So they are effectively like trading firms, and the trading volumes do get quite high, right? So this high frequency basically refers to like the trading volumes. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, so there's another one. How should we do mock interviews with our partners? So do we test each other on lead code questions that we have not done before outside of the cosmology list? Or how could we do it effectively? Right. So we will have a live demo about this like maybe like 2 to 3 weeks time. But the general idea here is that sure, you can test questions that you have already seen before or questions that you have not seen. I think both doesn't really matter. So I think when you're doing mock interviews, the main process is how do you perform when you already seen a question and you know how to do the question? And how do you perform when you've not seen a question and you do not know how to do that question, right? So I think these are two scenarios that you have to appropriately like prepare yourself for, right? So in that case, you can discuss with your partner how do you want to approach both of these scenarios? Yeah. So I think we'll go through this in further detail, like in maybe like 2 to 3 weeks time. So just stay tuned to that. But in general, those two scenarios is something that you should consider. Okay, so there's another question. So once we do the tips questions for the week, are we supposed to copy paste it into the tips website, or is the tips website to ask any questions we have for the liquid questions? So you're supposed to copy paste the question that you've done, your answers to the tips website. So we'll be using that to track your progress through the weeks. Okay, is there any other questions? Can we still change the resume we've submitted after the deadline or just stick to the version before the deadline? So the first resume submission that you're required to submit, right, is just a very preliminary draft that you've had like sitting in your folders, right? So it's something for you to think about, like the technical accomplishment that you've had like for the past year or so, right? And we just want you to get started on writing the resume. So next week we'll be talking more about like resume writing skills. So that's when you properly review your resume, and then we'll ask you to resubmit like maybe 2 weeks times. Yeah. So I mean, in case you're wondering whether or not you should stick to the version, it depends on you, whether you want to review your resume now or change it later, like in 2 weeks or 2 to 3 weeks later. How do we access the page you are currently on right now? So this is the tech interview. Okay, so I'll just send this link in the chat. Okay, I'll just be here for like another 2 minutes. If there are no more questions, I will probably end the Zoom call. Okay, so there's one question. Should I start learning Python or C++ right now for practicing leak code? Because I'm more used to Java due to 2030 and 2040. Honestly speaking, you could stick to Python. I mean, you could stick to Java for your leak coding practices in general. But I mean, do take some time to learn like Python or C++ depending on your career aspirations. So if you want to eventually join a trading firm, then do learn C++ on the side. Otherwise, you can try Python on the side as well. Yeah, but stick to Java because that's the most familiar language that you have, right? Okay, so someone asked if cosmology is the main avenue for us to ask any questions we have, or is there any other avenues? So generally, if you're asking like a non-sensitive question, you can just ask directly in the forum, like cosmology forums. It's open and available to all of you, so that I don't have to repeat my answer across multiple people who's asking me the same question. But otherwise, if it's like a very sensitive questions, you feel free to email us at soc-tips24, right? It's the one that I've sent in the cosmology. Then you can find it somewhere here, right? Great. Yeah, somewhere here. Okay, one more minute before I close the Zoom. If anyone have any more questions, feel free to write it in the chat. Okay, so 1 minute is up. So thank you for taking the time to attend this session tonight. So I'll see you guys in the next session. Bye bye.